Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and start. We just want to welcome everyone. I'm Lori Heffelfinger. I am the president-elect for 2021 for HR Strategy Forum. And I will be co-facilitating with James Jackman, who will be producing today. So welcome. We're very excited for our program today. This program has been put together by Barbara Bale. Barbie, you want to wave? She's our experience creation co-chair, and Kristen Spear. Kristen, you want to raise your hand? And Marilyn Stemper. And then Vicki Arnold is also on that committee. All right, so let's move to the next slide. Just want to tell you a little bit about HR. James, I need you to advance the slide. Tell you a little bit about HR Strategy Forum. For those of you who don't know, we are the California connection for strategically focused HR leaders, and we pride ourselves on our strategic programming and our focus on strategic HR leaders. So if you're one of those, welcome. And if you want to be, welcome, welcome. And our mission is really to equip HR to proactively lead in our rapidly changing world of work. Okay. We'll move to the, yes. And then we just want a big request, a big shout out to our sponsors. Those of you who are sponsors, you want to turn on your video, raise your hand. We've got a lot of really great sponsors who make all of this possible. Okay. James, I totally need help switching the slides. Okay. Just something that we've added, we're wanting to, because we're all virtual, we're wanting to have a more intimate community and to engage you. And the way that we're doing that is we've just introduced a new Slack channel so that we can have peer-to-peer conversations there around various topics. So our speakers will be on Slack afterwards, and we'll be interacting with you and sharing tools and ideas. But it's a great way to talk informally. We think this is probably a little better than LinkedIn. Also, it is a way of announcing events that are coming up. If you're a vendor, we do have a channel where you can promote your workshops in that channel. And Pyle, you want to raise your hand, turn on your video?
I am not able to turn on my video. There's a little bit of distraction in my background, but hello. And I just posted the most recent link. I apologize. I sent a slightly amended one earlier. So the one that's in the chat, please use it. And I'll try and go in and also add people that aren't already in there over the course of the next hour.
So Pyle is the one who's, she's the brainchild between getting our Slack channel started. She is, we will be inviting you all to Slack after this, if you're not already involved. And if you would like, if you need any help getting into Slack, getting set up, doing a tutorial, her email is listed right here, and James will put it into chat as well. Okay, need help with the slides again, James? Okay, I just want to tell you a little bit about our upcoming programs. We have added a holiday party, December 3rd, 4 to 5. It will be a cocktail hour, so bring your cocktails. And we will be celebrating all of you and the hard work that you've put in this year, 2020. It's a year of the HR leader, absolutely. And we'll be having some fun too, ringing out the year, toasting in the new year. So that's going to happen January 3rd. And then we've got a great program coming up January 21st that I'm going to have Barbara talk about.
Okay, so we're really excited about the January 21st meeting. For those of you who saw the HBR article on the 21 HR jobs of the future, we have gotten the lead researcher, Jean Meister, to come in and spend time with us to talk about the mega trends driving the new HR skills. We thought it'd be a great way to kick off the new year talking about us and our community and how these jobs are changing. She's going to deep dive into 5 new HR roles: the future of work leader, the working from home facilitator, the human bias officer, the director of well-being, and the HR data detective. I love that. And she's got a lot of energy and a lot of great research that she's going to share with us. So please make sure you can register now. Join us on January 21st. It'll be a great way to kick off the new year. Okay, next slide. I think we're going to talk about programs. Okay, great. So we're already in planning for next year. It just talked about the first speaker. The second one will be actually looking at the new talent operating model, how to use talent across organizations. Edie Goldberg and her newest book, Inside Gig, will be sharing a real-time situation in which she's working with a client. So a guest CHRO will be joining her and sharing how to change the system to use and manage talent within our own organizations. We're also going to be talking about, on May 20th, remaking culture in this new reality. September 16th, using HR analytics to help drive change. And then at the end of the year, on November 18th, we're looking back at 2 very interesting years, 2020 and 2021, and looking forward, lessons learned from reinvention. Reinvention is our theme for next year. And we'll have a panel of CEOs and CHROs talking about that together. So please get involved and join us. We're also looking for people to join us on the Experience Creation Programs team. If you're interested, let me know. Just chat me, and we'd love you to get involved. Thanks.
And we may be sprinkling in some other informal programs in between, lunch and learns or connecting meetings as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, let's move to the next slide. All right, so today, all of our programs are interactive. We really encourage your participation, both in chat and in the breakout. So be sure and introduce yourself if you haven't, name, organization, role, email if you're willing. Enter your questions in chat. Please mute yourself during the presentation. And like other virtual sessions, just a consent to use your image, voice, or written entries. All right, let's move to the next slide. We are very excited to be introducing this topic, the future of work and the new employee experience, shifting from talent management to people success. And in this session, we're going to be learning how to examine what is truly motivating employees in today's work world. And with us, we have Craig Ramsey, who's going to be sharing his most hot, off the press, recent research, and 2 of his colleagues. So let's go to the next page. Just quickly, Craig is our current president, and he's been on the board for at least 10 years plus. We love him, and we're excited that he's going to be speaking for us. His passion is making people's work lives more meaningful. As a leader of Glint People Science Research at Analytics at LinkedIn, he applies over 20 years of experience and deep research to help customer organizations measure and improve employee engagement and performance. Prior to Glint, he held positions as vice president of client partnerships and managing director of the San Francisco Bay office for Sirota Mercer. As director of people analytics at both Intuit and Symantec, he established and led global centers of excellence, focusing on enabling business leaders to make talent decisions with predictive and actionable insights. He's currently the chair of the HR Strategy Forum and was past chair of the Information Technology Survey Group, a survey research consortium of the world's top technology companies. Craig has a master's in organizational development from the University of San Francisco, a BS in industrial engineering from San Jose State University, and he lives in Livermore with his wife, Dana. And this I did not know. He plays the double bass in the Glint band and loves to kayak and hike and bike the trails of Northern California. Welcome, Craig.
All right, thank you very much, Lori. Thanks a lot, and really a pleasure to be speaking today. I'd like to introduce Tom and Jeff in this introduction, but I first want to paint a little picture about a people science team at Glint, of which the three of us are from. Glint joined LinkedIn 2 years ago, and during that acquisition, Glint brought with it a new function to LinkedIn, which LinkedIn doesn't have and didn't have at the time, the people science team. We are a team of 50 researchers, consultants, and practitioner experts who serve as trusted advisors to help transform the workplace practices of Glint's customers. So I'm proud to introduce two of my colleagues, Jeff Jokerst. Jeff is head of People Science US West at Glint. For nearly 15 years, Jeff has worked as an employee engagement practice leader, helping companies optimize their workplaces. Prior to joining Glint, Jeff served as a consultant with Gallup for over 5 years and also as the leader of employee engagement at the Service Management Group. During this time, Jeff worked directly with executives of companies across industries to turn insights into action that improve both the company performance and employee experience. Jeff holds a master's degree in psychology from the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Tom Nolan. Tom is a people science senior consultant with Glint, where he partners with clients to help drive improvements in their most critical business outcomes by leveraging best-in-class people science technology and design. During his career, Tom has advised executive teams in well over 100 national and global companies across all major industries. Prior to Glint, Tom worked in Gallup's workplace practice for 15 years, most recently as managing partner. While there, he consulted with clients and also served as an editorial advisor on several Gallup published books. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in journalism from the E.W. Scripps School of Journalism at the Ohio University. So welcome, Tom and Jeff. Let's see if the slide advance works. It should go to the next slide. Yes, great. Okay. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this topic today. You know, at Glint, we've been super passionate about developing what we call people success. And basically, it boils down to helping organizations, our clients, chart their own journey to a better and new and better world of work. We do recognize how global events and changes to the economy, to the workplace, societal expectations changing rapidly, the type of work people are expecting to do changing, the nature of the relationship between employees and their employers are all changing extremely rapidly. And it's contributing to an employee's sense of happiness or success, depending on how well the organization responds to those changes. So at Glint, we continue to explore through millions of data points. I think we've collected somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 million individual employee survey responses across our 700 customers. We're able to determine and establish what makes people feel successful in this new world. And that's what we plan to share with you today. So prior to that, I'd like to share or actually hear from you, the audience here. Think about how you would characterize the new world. James will launch a poll for us now with the following questions on it. And if you just take a moment to respond to this question. I'll bet you a lot of folks are just grappling with, how do you handle this virtual environment? How do you stay connected to people when you're working virtually? And what does that mean for the culture of the organization? Or maybe it's about not being able to disassociate and disconnect work from home. That's feeling of being always on. Is your work world rapidly changing? So, are you bracing yourself in the organizations for these changes? Or maybe it feels experimental. You're trying new things. This is actually an opportunity to try new things and see what works best for your team. Or maybe it's all of the above. James, if you have the results for the poll, we can share. As as I expected, it's probably a combination of all these things. So certainly, we probably not experienced so much change so fast. We have 67% of you have said all of the above. So most of us feel that we're experiencing all these changes simultaneously. Um, and so there's likely to be pros and cons of adjusting to all of these things. And our goal here is to help organizations leverage these experiences and enable people's success. Given that, our mission at Glint has never been more important. Our mission is basically to help people be happier and more successful at work. And in these challenging and ambiguous times, that means helping employees feel valued and supported, and also giving them a voice in shaping the future of their organizations. So we have a lot to talk about today, but before we do get any further, our goal today is to help you understand what your people, your employees want and expect in the world of work. And using that as a lens to apply the people success habits to encourage managers to improve the employee experience overall. So our agenda will be, I'll share some research findings for about 20 minutes, the latest research. Most of this has not been published yet. And then Jeff and Tom, my colleagues, will introduce the people success approach and the 4 habits that are part of that approach and guide us through some breakout sessions so we can process that information with the attendees. I'm having a little trouble advancing the slides, James. Okay, there we go. So there's been a lot of discussion about the new world of work, but what does that actually mean? Well, one thing's for sure, 2020 has brought with it unprecedented change and uncertainty. It has refocused our energy and attention on the importance of people. The future is now, and employees are telling us what they want, what they expect, and fundamentally, organizations have had to respond with a new focus on safety, security, and I guess you could call it the humanness of work, the humanness, the people aspects of work. Earlier in 2020, Glint analyzed responses to our customer surveys across millions of employees and found some interesting statistics. I'll just quote a few here. 34% of organizations have seen a decrease in work-life balance. We've seen an increase in an always-on culture. Working with our partner at Microsoft, the Microsoft Workplace Analytics team, we found that 72% of the messages that employees were sent pre and post working hours. So we know that this always-on culture is actually happening in a great degree more than it was prior to the work from home and the pandemic. Compounded by the distress of a global pandemic, we've seen some unfortunate and unsurprising circumstances, like an increased risk of burnout. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in this discussion. But employees are suddenly doing more work, sometimes with less resources, with new challenges. Some of those are people are trying to balance dependent care at home, balancing work with home life. Has been a challenge unlike they've seen in any time prior to 2020. So given this underlying stress and uncertainty about the future and what we may or may not be changing, or what may or may not be changing, employees are saying they want the ability to work wherever they need to work, and they don't want to be required to be in the office 5 days a week when the pandemic starts to lift. The stay from home orders start to lift. So there's some flexibility expectations that have been set up that are probably going to persist. As 2020 continued to get more unpredictable, we at Glint on my research team, we started to wonder what sort of fundamental shifts are taking place in terms of employee expectations and experience. We started looking into what really motivates employees today to do their best work and how worker needs have shifted from pre-pandemic times. We wanted to really know, what really matters to people right now. Is it different? Is there a fundamental shift in the expectations of an organization? And are we helping organizations focus on the right things in the right way to help workers be the best they can be, even during challenging times? This might not be the last time we go through a pandemic or some other major global change circumstances. As all of you know, through the decades, if you've been studying any of this, you've seen mountains of data on what workers need to be happy during good times and bad. Every couple of days, one of the major publications will tell you the secret sauce to making employees be their best and do their best. But the problem is there's been very few completely comprehensive models to help us really stand back and understand the total employee experience, the work experience holistically, and from a more human-centric versus sort of worker perspective. So, you know, that's the challenge that my team felt. And on the next slide, we'll see a proposed model. I'll talk a little bit about this. So starting last summer, the team started studying the fundamental theories and models of human motivation. We took a step back, sort of, you know, you probably have heard of models like Maslow's hierarchy, Alderfer's ERG theories, and many, many others of human motivation. There's a good 12 to 15 models in psychology publications to review. And I discovered that across these dozens of needs hierarchy models, there was many that started, various organizations have started applying these models to work environments. I extracted 14 work environment models and did a meta-analysis across all of the constructs to build a new proposed employee hierarchy model, which you see here on this page. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy and other hierarchy needs, you'll probably recognize the left-hand column. Very simply put, this is needs being met on the most basic level, and typically people are not aspiring to needs being met at the next level up until those needs are met. So it is a hierarchy of needs. So it's an empirical model. We haven't yet tested this model. We will be able to do that early next year with data across our clients. But essentially, let me introduce you to the different levels of the model. Starting at the bottom, we have basic safety and survival needs. Meeting these needs is essential for workers to be able to survive on the job and subsist in their lives outside of work. To put this in perspective, according to the International Labor Organization, nearly 3 million people die as a result of occupational accidents or work-related diseases per year globally. That's a huge number. So there are people living in the bottom level here and never aspire to anything higher than that. They're in survival mode. As basic survival needs are met, other needs surface at the next level up. So workers seek well-being, and they want to feel psychologically safe at work. They want to have a sense of dignity and positive and productive work environment where they can feel treated fairly and protected from harassment and violence. They desire a sense of security with their employer, that their job situation will afford them economic stability over time. At the next level up, you have relationship needs. And in those needs, employees are basically seeking authentic social connections, acceptance, inclusion in their workplace. They desire camaraderie and collaboration on the team and a sense of community across the organization. These close relationships with coworkers foster respect, build trust, and ultimately result in a deeper sense of belonging in the organization. We're finding that that sense of belonging is absolutely critical to performance and engagement. Higher in the hierarchy, employees are now wanting to feel a sense of self-esteem and pride in the success of their work. They need to feel competent, valued, worthy of their efforts and accomplishments, especially when they're recognized and rewarded properly. They need to feel respected and appreciated for their unique voice and perspectives and talents. And finally, you have fulfillment of lower order needs. Once the fulfillment of most of those needs are met, you actually see an employee turning from what's been mostly inward and self-satisfying needs to outwards. That is projecting beyond themselves to examine their sense of purpose in the world and serving others and making a difference in the world around them. They look for growth and challenge, for transformational opportunities to reach their full potential. They seek freedom of choice to pursue their creativity, their passions, and a path to complete fulfillment. So the proposed model, like I said, hasn't been tested yet. That's coming soon, but it gives us it's given us a really good framework and taxonomy by which to examine various aspects of work life today, especially under the pressure of the pandemic. So to the next slide. So I was curious to know during this time of unprecedented change and uncertainty, how employees are feeling about the relative importance of these needs at each level of the model. So what we did in October is we sent out a survey basically to thousands of LinkedIn members around the globe to rate each of these concepts, each of these levels in terms of their relative importance. And what we found wasn't very surprising. You know, the bottom of the pyramid here, the bottom of the hierarchy is where fair treatment and healthy and safe work environment, these are front and center in employees' minds today. You can see by the statistics there how many people rate that important. Nearly everybody. And it didn't matter if you cut that by regions, job levels, or generations. That number is extremely important to people. We also saw that at the higher levels in the hierarchy, you can see that the needs for recognition and making the world a better place and those kinds of things are important, but far less important right now than the basics. So, you know, with the pandemic spiking, the death toll rising and so forth, people really are still living in a great degree of fear and are concerned about the basics right now. And the extent to which their workplaces are either helping them get through that or hindering them is really important to people right now. So let's take a closer look at some of the basic worker needs, specifically around work-life balance and burnout risk. Next slide. While people are working from home and are even asking for more flexibility moving forward in terms of working from home, we see a declining feelings and well-being and really an impending burnout growing. As you can see by this chart, we measure the signal, employee burnout signal, by the percentage of comments, survey comments in response to how people are doing that talk about or express at least one factor of burnout for things like stress, workload, anxiety, and other related cues. And we're not asking about employees directly about burnout. This is employees voluntarily offering those topics as their most primary concerns right now. So we've been collecting this data since the beginning of the pandemic, and you can see it's been spiking up and to the right. It's reached its highest level as of August this year. So, you know, we know people are coping with this. Some organizations have been coping with this since the 6 or 8 months, and people are pretty much emotionally exhausted from what we can see in these data. But you know, the data are not all negatively trending. While some of the more basic needs in the hierarchy appear to be most important to employees right now, we're also seeing some interesting trends higher up in the hierarchy of needs at levels that we will talk about now. Connection. It may be obvious, but we can't emphasize this enough. Humans desire connection. But the way we connect in the world, especially the world of work, is different. I'm not getting the slide advanced. James, if you could help me with that. There we go. Okay. Next advance. Okay. We need to find new ways to help people feel connected. And this isn't just about collaboration tools. This is about feeling connected to purpose, mission, and values of the organization. And due to the pandemic, much of the workforce works in isolation. It takes extra conscious effort for us as leaders to ensure that people are feeling connected with their peers and creating experiences to ensure that team members are connected and collaborating with each other. This is especially critical when you look at the recent events that have surfaced with issues for our members of the Black community and other underrepresented communities. Things like diversity, inclusion, and belonging have always mattered, but if they're not part of your core strategy yet, they really ought to be moving forward. We're seeing an incredible increase in the impact of belonging on engagement. So every member of the workforce is asking themselves big questions right now, whether or not they belong to an organization where they can really feel they belong. The next one is collaboration. Collaboration scores are increasingly significant over the past 3 months, which shatters some of the traditional work paradigms of needing to be present to be able to collaborate on work. Capability is about having the skills to be successful and continuously growing and learning. You can see here that 62% of employees want to learn more and want more time for it. We've also seen almost every group across the workforce engage in more learning. In fact, managers increase their learning time with LinkedIn Learning, as we can measure the course signups, by 105% since the pre-pandemic times. If employees don't feel that they are continuously learning and growing, they'll probably be looking for outside employment opportunities to do that as soon as they can. And finally, choice. This is about agency. People want to feel they have some control over their work and their destiny. they can see here that empowered employees are 3.4 times more likely to be engaged. And engagement, empowerment comes in the form of decisions about day-to-day work, including when and where to work. So I'm wondering if this data seems surprising or validating to folks out there. In the chat, why don't you just chat whether any of this data, is it surprising or validating? Let's hear from a few folks out there. Based on what you've seen and what we've seen up to this point. Yeah, it's thanks, John. I think it's dead on. So it's validating for John. It's right on point in terms of what you've probably experienced as well. It's validating and positive on the collaboration and learning front. Thanks, Julie. Spot on, not really surprised. Thanks, TJ. Yeah, you know, a lot of this makes sense in hindsight as you look at the data. It's not really surprising. It is validating. But what it paints the picture of is really a new normal. This is probably not something that we're going to slide back into pre-pandemic times in terms of the culture and workplace expectations prior to the pandemic. So we are seeing a new normal. We are studying that. We are using data to validate what's real. And with that, I'm going to pass the conversation over to Jeff, and Jeff will then introduce the People Success, Glint's new approach and framework to helping place your people at the center of attention. Jeff?
Great. Thanks, Craig. And James, I'm going to apologize ahead of time for the slide advancement because I have several animations in a couple of slides. So we'll see how good of a team we are. So we'll spend the rest of our time talking about the people success approach. And when we say people success, really what we mean is bringing your best self to work so you can do your best work. And a people success strategy really helps organizations and leaders really put people at the center of everything that they do. It addresses the needs of individuals and empowers them to take joint ownership over their happiness, their development, prosperity. And while no two organizations will do this exactly the same, there's a few hallmark principles that are true for any successful people success strategy. And those are that they're holistic. If you think about like traditional talent management activities, they tend to be very siloed. In a people success approach, it really looks to integrate employee engagement, performance management, learning and development efforts under a shared framework. Second, they tend to be agile. And I know the word agile is maybe overused. So I want you to just think of it as people success habits. When they're agile, it flexes with the business needs. And in today's COVID world, we all know that the plans that we are able to make and then flex as we see it adapted in this like ever-changing environment tend to be the best ones. And the same is true when it comes to a successful people success approach. And then lastly, they tend to be people-centric. So historically, talent management programs, they've been designed with the organization in mind, not necessarily the employee or the individuals in our organization. And a people-centric approach really puts the employee at the center of everything that we do. So we're going to dig into that one just a little bit more here. Go to the next slide, James. Off to a good start. At Glint, we're obsessed with our mission. So which is to help people be happier and more successful at work. The second time that you've heard this already in the first 30 minutes of today's presentation. So we truly are obsessed about it. And we think in order to do that and achieve this mission, we really need to stop designing one size fits all programs like performance management or training programs that are just like the same thing for everyone. And instead, what we really need to do is think about individualizing the experience for every person. And again, that's what we refer to as being people-centric. We've created a model that really helps us to kind of think about that people-centric product and our solutions. If we go ahead and click to the first one here, Jane, awesome. The very first thing that comes up when you're thinking about a people-centric approach is that you need to give managers, leaders, and employees insights and feedback that helps them to better understand their teams and themselves. Most often, this comes from employee surveys. But that feedback really helps to fuel great conversations. And if we go ahead and click one more time, James, And the conversations are really what many of us on the people science team maybe say is the most important element of the entire model. Conversations are something that employees are already having on a regular basis today with managers, but feedback or insights from the employees themselves can help make those conversations far more rich and significantly more effective. If we go ahead and click to the next one, those great conversations can also then start to fuel really good conversations and help managers and employees focus not only on the goals that make the company more successful, but we think that the goals can help people to grow personally and professionally as well, which if we click to the next one, is really about like this idea of goals fueling learning and development opportunities for our employees, which we know is very critical to an employee being successful and highly engaged with our work. And the last kind of element of this whole thing is that if we click one more time, James, is that we don't want to think about these 4 elements as just these huge standalone efforts, but rather to be thinking about them as habits and things that we do on an ongoing basis within our organization. And as the individual has these unique needs that change over time. Go ahead and click on to the next slide. So we're going to work through those 4 habits, and we're going to really try to do it in a unique way by taking the perspective of the manager. We'll go through each habit individually, and then we'll discuss it from a manager's perspective. So I'd like to take your HR hat off, which I know can be a little bit of a challenge, and put yourself in the position of a manager in your organization. And specifically, if we click to the next one, we went ahead and we created a manager persona for you to take the perspective of. Margot, very catchy name, just as luck would have it. So Margot, the manager, is who we're going to continue kind of going back to and looking at her perspective from a more traditional framework, and then one at which she adopts a more people success framework. So Margot is a manager of 10 sales professionals. They come in a variety of experience. Some are brand new to the sales role. Some have been doing that for a long period of time. She's responsible for both existing sales and building up existing accounts, as well as selling new accounts within her region. She's been at it for about 20 years. She was recently promoted to senior level position, and she's done all the required training. Many of them, she actually feels like took her away from her job and got her a little bit off focused. So once she got back to her desk, none of those things that she learned in training seemed to be applicable to her really busy team. And frankly, that was kind of what she took away, is that this training would work in an ideal environment, but my team's really busy, so I can't apply these things. She's having regular team meetings twice a week with her team, where they go through their goals and they try to update some of their goals based on the organization's strategy. And then she does one-on-one meetings as well, where she's talking about the individual goals that she's established for her team members as well. Finally, she's getting a ton of information from her HR group, but it tends to be a little all over the place. And she's struggling with what does she focus on. So she really feels like right now she needs a lot of focus, and she feels like some of that HR information maybe pulls her off base just a little bit with her team. So hopefully you can relate to a manager similar to Margot within your own organization. And I want you to keep this persona in mind as we talk about the habits. So with that, we'll jump right into habit number 1, which is really about gaining feedback and insights. So feedback and insights is really what allows our managers at every level to better understand how do they support their team. We know it's critical because there's often a gap, as we all have probably experienced, between what a manager believes their team needs or an individual needs and what that individual actually needs. We also see another gap in the data in that senior leaders are prioritizing engagement about 40% of the time, but only about 1/3 of the organization's managers are actually highly skilled at fostering an engaged team and engaged individuals. So there's definitely, I think, a realization that we know we want engagement to be important. Most senior leaders are saying, yes, this is important, but the actual ability to make that happen is lacking in so many of our organizations. So we've actually identified a few best practices, which you see on the left, to capture more of this feedback and insights in the best way possible. So the first one is just to make it simple and practical. Short and focused pulse surveys are clearly the best approach. We see this time and time again. Not only is it easier from the survey taker's experience, so you can do it much more frequently, but also the digestion of the data on the part of your managers is far easier. Second is that it should be predictive. The things that you're asking your employees should be predictive of engagement and business outcomes. We don't want to ask just for the sake of asking, right? We want to ask because it's important in maybe elevating our organization's knowledge as it relates to the hierarchy that Craig just talked about, right? And then lastly, making it timely. So regular pulses or anytime feedback when it's really, really important. And I'll maybe just add like a second tidbit here that a silver lining associated with COVID has been the realization in many organizations that this agile approach to surveying wasn't quite as big of a deal as maybe we kind of built it up to be previously. So we often thought like we have to do this annual survey and there's a big buildup to this annual survey. Well, COVID hit, and what we learned, and many leaders kind of became open to the fact is we're doing things that we've never done before, and we got to get some feedback on that, right? And we got to get that feedback really quickly. And so they've been much more open to these really focused surveys that are happening much more often. And they're finding that they can easily digest this information when it comes back to them because it is so focused, it's timely, and employees are feeling reinforced by the fact that their organization is making adjustments based upon their feedback. All right, if we go to the next one, James. So we'll go back to Margot. Go ahead and click through these. We'll go back to Margot really quick. And in Margot's traditional environment, what she's been faced with is this yearly survey where she goes through once a year. All of her employees take a full census survey, and she gets information back from that survey about 6 months after it's actually done. And then the HR team really kind of puts together the action plan for her. Unfortunately, what this process does is it provides her very little feedback in terms of how it can improve her team and how she can improve as a leader in managing her team. Converse that with, or counter to that with, a more people success approach. And in this one, Margot starts to more routinely engage her employees for their feedback. And so she starts to make some discoveries about what she can do in real time to adjust her approach, remove barriers for them to help them be more successful. And it allows her to be a much better leader because she's understanding this stuff in a much more real-time environment. Not only that, but Margot has been able to realize that not only do I just have to like wait for this one annual survey, but she's able to implement her own things like 360 or asking in real time her employees for feedback about specific things that she's done with them to see if those have been successful. So with that, that's kind of our first habit. I'll turn this over to Tom.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. And just, maybe an example on kind of the previous 2 points that you were making about the shift to more frequent and the unplanned benefits of what's happened relative to leaders in organizations, those in HR and other areas, needing to gather more information, very timely, very critical as they're adjusting and pivoting to what's happening in the organization. And I know maybe you're seeing some of the same things in your organizations or the organizations that you work with, but I know that I've seen, especially with larger organizations, where they may have had on the docket for some point in the future where they'd like to take a more agile approach to collecting feedback from their employees, but thought of it as a huge change management process. Introduce COVID, all the implications of that, the need to gather information a lot faster, many times to drive decisions, very critical decisions that need to happen. And to Jeff's point, many times that happened a little easier than many organizations and leaders thought. And with a lot of the companies that I've been working with, I've seen it move a bit from the push approach of pushing data to leaders and hoping that they do some things to it, to the inverse of that, and that's pull. I'd like more information, I'd like more timely. And we're not talking about massive amounts of information, but nice short pulses, sometimes asking the same things on a more frequent basis. So the shift that's happened there, I think, is something that will likely stay with us for quite a while. Good, James, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. We'll talk about the second habit, and that is effective conversations. And these conversations help organizations and individuals overcome some of those challenges and achieve some of those more ambitious goals. And they serve as a point of connection, particularly given the number of folks who are working remotely and or maybe switching a little bit back and forth between remote and on-site. What's important here is the impact of more frequent one-to-one meetings that they're having with their managers. And in conversations in this context are a little bit more informal, perhaps, than we may think about previous, performance management oriented conversations. Some of the data that we've collected and analyzed, we found that people who have one-to-one conversations more than once a month are more likely to say that they've received effective feedback and that they've had meaningful career conversations and they feel they have better support. You'll have actually a customer I'm meeting with this afternoon to review some recent research with their workforce that change, support for change and adaptation is a key driver of theirs. And we're seeing where they're having more conversations and having a little bit more learning and development opportunities where they're seeing better results there. So in a world where employees are craving some increased well-being, of course, and that connection, meaning, and purpose, these conversations are really critical. And then it's important that managers may be already having these conversations. And I mentioned it may be more tactical in nature, simply going over projects. Conversations are talking about career prioritization, but moving more of those toward well-being and a sense of connection and smaller, more frequent conversations. And I think Craig mentioned it just a bit ago about with some of the data that we're able to incorporate from Microsoft on their workforce analytics, we're also able to see some of these activities as they're happening, monthly, quarterly, and linking that to more positive outcomes that we're seeing. So, it's one to ask about it happening. It's another to be able to balance that with what we do see happening so that we can make sure that we are in the position to advise customers on what seems to be the optimal mix when it comes to frequency, time, and I think the next frontier then is just to make sure that we're talking about the right content for that as well. James, if you'd move forward one. We've mentioned several times how powerful simplicity is here, and especially when we're adjusting to some changing times here. And we've come up with a very simple conversation framework. We call it the ACT conversation framework, and it stands for acknowledge where we are, collaborate on where we want to go, and take one step forward. And really, it's an attempt to simplify the process of making sure that employee feedback is being heard, acted upon, and then at least one step is being taken, because that will lead to others. And so by developing that, we've developed around some sound principles around the practice and repetition that will provide prompts to help drive those conversations, help maximize that psychological safety, drive some focus for it, create an environment where it's okay to learn and adjust in a very agile way. And prompts like these enable managers to own the ongoing conversation about taking action that fuel progress. A lot of the firsthand experience that I've had and colleagues that I work with have had is there's that big struggle for managers of help me understand exactly what I should do. And a framework like this can help, though it's not limiting. It's speak to your individuals and your team members, acknowledge where you are based on the data that you receive, talk together about something that you can work on, and then figure out what that one step is that you can take to move forward. Great. James, if you wouldn't mind advancing, please. And you can click through the builds here. Yeah, so let's take a look back at Margot. So, she's checking the box in those regular conversations with her team, but they're focused, more on projects and tactical things. She's holding monthly team meetings, but it tends to be more of a forum for her to talk and less talking coming from the team. And that there's performance conversations that are once a year and mostly viewed adequate by Margot and the team. And so it's quite rote, quite traditional, something that we've been used to for years. But once she makes that transition to a people success approach, she reviews her team member goals as she's going into one-to-one, so she can ask questions and be prepared for a two-way conversation. So this allows her to find out how she can remove barriers and prioritize that work, because remember, removing barriers was a really important goal for Margot. And more importantly, the topics of conversation have now expanded to things that are more important to people's success, to learning, recognition, career interests, concern for employee well-being and connection, and even what she can do better, because you're using some of those simple prompts on the things that are important to individuals. So they feel more heard, more supported. They feel more connection with Margot, because she's now able to ask those questions rather than just download information and keep things on that previously tactical level. And then using that ACT model, Margot and the team are able to address engagement issues together in a timely and collaborative fashion. Good. Well, good. We're going to work our way, James, if you would, into the next topic, into a first breakout activity. It'll be probably about 10 to 15 minutes or so. James is going to move people into a breakout, but what we'd like you to do, because to this point, of course, whether you're thinking about this from your own organization or the organizations you work with, these all are well and good as you're talking about them, but each organization has their own set of unique challenges around that. So we'd like you to discuss those in your breakout group, or when looking at these habits of pulsing more regularly, asking for feedback in the moment, use insights to fuel better conversations, enabling managers, and using that framework. If you see those other three box areas there, what some norms or barriers in your particular organization that could potentially be getting in the way? What are some of the enablers that you have? What might accelerate that? And then what's one new thing that you can to try to address and maybe advance one or both of those habits? And so we'll have you moved into the breakout groups. And then when we come out of that, we'd like to have one of the folks on your team volunteer to insert those some of your findings and your points into the chat. And then maybe we'll ask for people to enhance that a little bit by adding to it and filling in some of the blanks for us.
Okay, so when you get into your breakout rooms, you'll have 15 minutes. Be sure and do a quick introduction. Be sure and turn on your videos and enjoy the connection and learning.
Also, before you go ahead, can you advance to the next slide? We've created a simpler set of questions to focus on that support these. And I think it will be easier to just look at what barriers exist to these habits coming into life, and then what can you do to accelerate these habits. So that's really what we're asking you to do. We'll put these questions into chat.
So if we could, before we went to the breakout, we asked if you could have one person kind of be the chat-based spokesperson for your team to put in some of your thoughts and maybe some of the key things or most interesting things that you found relative to what barriers and or accelerants that you had in that. So feel free to do that. Also like to open it up to anyone who'd like to unmute and just share a little bit about your group's conversation. Either or both is just fine.
Hey, this is Jason. I'll just say, we recognize that barriers can come in a couple of different flavors. There can be your leadership can be a barrier. Your existing culture can also be a barrier. And so it's kind of the pros and cons, right? Those are the same levers that you need to make change in the opposite direction, but they can also be barriers.
Yeah, great point. That's well said. That's it can be the accelerant if you can get that part right, or it can be the barrier. Yeah, great point. How about other themes from any other teams?
Hi, this is Julie. I'll speak on behalf of our team. So we talked about barriers, and then we talked about new ways to think about it as well. So on the barriers, I think more traditionally is you still have managers and leaders who are not taking the time not only to have one-on-ones or meet with their employees. But more so is that even if that is happening, the employee does not feel heard, or there isn't enough empathy to their issues. And so that translates into, or can translate into a lack of respect. And so we talked about the importance of not just going through for people's success. It's kind of normalized. It really is about that connection, right? So I think more of the informality, more of the listening. We talked about the need for nowadays at the pace that we're moving. Some of the successes that are happening are things that are shorter, more regular in nation. I used an example of a company that has scheduled through COVID regular company meetings for 30 minutes at the beginning of every day. If they use 10 minutes, that's fine. But it also gives voice to employees who want to talk, and especially from a generational perspective, is that employees have an opinion. They want to shape issues big, and they want to understand from a values perspective how the company believes in response to that, and that can only happen through conversation. So creating those touch points are very important. We also then moved to a couple other great new ways, and one of them is the notion of potentially in executive development is ensuring that there's a dedicated person versus the manager that's focused on learning for groups or teams, so that we're not stretching someone to fit in yet another priorities when this is something at the core that's important to everybody, and therefore putting the resources behind it so that it doesn't fall off the rails. And then the notion of collaborative overload has come up. And Sally shared with us that, there's a person called Leslie Perlow who talks about in our own designs, how do we create constraints? And that we just need to allow more space to happen for people to be creative. So more quick touch and listening and heard so that people can lead, and more space so that people can innovate and be creative.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Julie and team. How about we've got time for maybe one more, if there's a team or someone who felt they touched on something else that could either supplement that or maybe even entirely different from what we've heard.
I'll speak up on behalf of my team. We talked about many things, but one that was a highlight was being able to give and receive feedback, and how difficult that can be for so many people. It's a skill that needs to be learned, and many people don't have or can't articulate what they're seeing, and it actually takes time and effort to be able to articulate it. And then on the receiving end, oftentimes without training or unskilled, we can hear it as if it's me personally and not like a potential opportunity to change and be even more impactful. So I think we have to keep that in mind as we think about that as the first piece. And then lastly, with the stress in the COVID environment, I think we tend toward our old habits. And so the giving feedback isn't necessarily a priority. It's not necessarily something, we have to actually plan for it. We don't necessarily have the time, and add the skills lacking as well. And I think it can get really messy and fester over time, unfortunately.
Yeah, great points in that they're additive in a negative direction if not done well. That's great. And that's going back to what we shared a few minutes ago about that ACT framework, that is an attempt to help simplify that in a way that maybe increases the likelihood that it lands the right way, that if you're acknowledging where you are based on data from feedback and then collaborating on what to do, instead of just receiving what to do, hopefully that can help with a little change there. So great feedback. Really appreciate you sharing that. And I'd like to turn it back over to Jeff to cover our next habit.
Right. Yeah, that great input. I have to say I'm like a little jealous that I'm not a part of some of these breakout groups, because that's excellent. Like some of the notes around taking a little bit of extra time for some compassion in the conversation, I think is something that we are seeing over and over in our survey work from employees across so many organizations that we're working with right now. So great discussion. So we'll dive into habit 3, which is really around goals. And I'll maybe introduce this one with just by talking a little bit about the progress principle, which is a great book that's been published by some fantastic researchers. But essentially the gist of it is that they looked at 12,000 diary entries from about 238 employees, and they analyzed it, right? And what they were really trying to uncover is like, what's the inner world of work based on these daily entries that these 238 employees were putting in. And what they found is that when participant said, this is like one of my very best days, there was a very common piece associated with that. And that is that they indicated they had made some type of progress on an important project or goal they had established for themselves. And that was really like far and away, like the biggest indicator of any other like driver around what was increasing the likelihood of saying like, this was a very good day, et cetera. Like that, just progress, making progress, indicating they had made some type of forward step on something that was important to them was a huge indicator. Yet if we ask managers, and remember that we talked about a gap between sometimes what a manager believes their work team wants to be engaged versus like what the employee actually needs to be engaged. Here would be an example. Only 5% of managers would identify progress as being a key motivator for their employees. Massive gap, right? Very clearly, 76% of these people who participated in a study, when they felt like they were most engaged, said it was because they had just done something that gave them that forward momentum. But only 5% of managers would say making progress on something is critical for our own employees' engagement. You know, there's other dynamics as we think about, referring back to some of what's on the slide here, is that, you know, if we think about like goals in general, we know that it can be really it can be really critical to help people prioritize. Maybe now more than ever, one of the most fundamental things that's occurred during the pandemic to help managers and employees be successful is that they've been ruthless about establishing better prioritization around goals and what should I be focused on. Managers who are looking at it and continually reviewing whether or not that's worth it to have it on their docket as a priority or not, and helping employees to remove it, are the ones that are helping to prevent things like stress, things like burnout, and frankly, they're helping their employees to be more successful in this really challenging environment. I had a real recent example of this where within a large organization who's been very impacted, I'll say like one of the industries that has been very impacted by COVID and layoffs and uncertainty about like, where does their industry go in the future? They had a manager who shared something recently, and he said, you know, I was going through my employees' goals and kind of like pulling from a system that allows him to see how many Jira tickets essentially had been cleared by each of his engineers. And he noticed that he had one particular employee who is like, in his word, just crushing it, picking up all kinds of additional projects, clearing out a whole bunch of things within the system. And, you know, scratch his head, obviously like happy to see that this employee was like working and being extremely productive. But the beauty of what this manager did is he thought about like, is he focused on the right prioritization? And he really kind of took into consideration like everything else that might be happening in this employee's world. So he sat down, had a conversation with the employee, and long and short is the employee shared that, you know, he's like really worried about his future here. He feels like, you know, there could be potential layoffs right around the corner. And so in response to that, like stressor, or that like lack of psychological stress or like psychological safety, he's been taking on more, feeling like that can secure my future. And as a result of that, he also expressed that he's been basically like giving all of his like home duties, the caring for the kids and things like that, largely to his wife, which is creating some stress in the home environment, right? So there's this like lack of balance that is occurring between this employee's work and life right now. And, you know, I won't say it's a little too early to tell whether or not the manager and the employee have it like completely tackled down in terms of like, are they finding the right balance to totally prevent burnout? But I will say this employee, after just a week of like developing a plan with the manager, so the manager basically like tried to reaffirm the employee's future and like what performance would be considered fantastic performance, et cetera. So he didn't feel like he had to like kill himself over this like need to perform well. The employee's wife actually sent the manager an email thanking him for like engaging in the conversation. And I think that's just a beautiful kind of way of looking at goals. We normally think of goals as like something just get higher and higher and higher. And in this case, this is like a situation where the goals really created the catalyst to engage in a conversation and think back to that loop that we have been talking about, right? You know, it's just going back to an earlier habit to say, how do I make sure that this goal is not becoming a barrier for this individual? And that is, I can't think of a better like people-centric example than that. So again, goals are extremely important in a normal period. I would say they're even more important during this pandemic time period that we're facing today. Let's go ahead and go on to the next slide and relate this back to Margot. And as we think about like Margot and her traditional goal setting, experience, typically it's been done on an annual basis, and the organization has really cascaded those goals down to the rest of the organization. Oftentimes that took about, a quarter worth of the year to actually get those real goals in place. And so, you're already against this, like we had 12 months, now we're at 9 months. And by the way, the goals that you cascaded down to me, they weren't specific to my team or me as an employee either. So again, it felt like very much a standalone type of activity that was occurring. Again, contrast that on the right with, Margot adopting this more people success approach. And now what she's doing is at least once a quarter, she and her team are going into their goals. They're updating them. They're talking about like, what would be a good goal to set for this particular quarter? So we're not looking so far in advance that it's hard to like understand like what might be those challenges that we're going to face. It's keeping it agile. So they're talking about what their immediate needs are, what the immediate obstacles are that they're facing, and creating a goal that matches those two things. It's also providing Margot information that she needs around like what would her employees need in order to meet the goals that they're establishing themselves. So because they're contributing to them, she's able to like start talking about what is it that is getting in the actual way of you being able to accomplish this particular goal. And then finally, she like keeps those goals, at part of her routine conversation by bringing them up in her regular one-on-one meetings that she's having with her employees. So much more successful approach when she adopted the people success strategy versus like the more traditional one, which is really slow and heavy. Tom?
Great. Thanks, Jeff. James, if you wouldn't mind. Yep. Which I believe James is going to be our MVP for this session, by the way. So maybe we'll vote in chat.
100%.
Good. So our final habit is around learning and growth. So we're seeing indications from employees around this pandemic that it's allowed them, or in some cases maybe forced them to do some soul searching regarding their career that they're in altogether. Organizations have also had to rethink their business strategy in what they need for skills, how to adjust, how to adapt to what's happening in their markets. There's quite a gamut of this, those that really haven't had to change at all and maybe have been bolstered in part by the developments, to those that have been shaken to their entire core and have to rethink how they even interact, maybe travel industry, hospitality, those that are really based on face-to-face consumer interaction every day. So even before all this happened, of course, work was requiring a new set of skills. Emerging stronger from this chaos, organizations are thinking about how they can and should reskill the workforce as soon as possible. So our data is showing that learning is happening in different ways, and it can be enabled during conversations or more frequent one-to-one conversations. Managers can really unlock learning and identify opportunities for learning that take place on the job through these conversations. You're using part of the example that Jeff just shared about, that's a real learning for a manager that can now use that for in the future of kind of overriding their own assumptions or inherent bias as to how their people are reacting, so that they can make sure that they are able to address that and identify it in a more of a one-to-one way. So managers are so critical to the process. They touch most of the organization, especially frontline managers, between who they manage and who they report to on the next level up. So it's so key that they are both exposed to some of this learning and kind of micro learning, and they're also encouraging it for the folks that they have on their team. We'll go to the next one if we would, James. I think Craig mentioned this at the beginning too, about we're seeing through course completion on LinkedIn, really significant increases across the board, but managers especially. And we think that's driven in large part due to managers being forced to learn how to do their jobs differently in an entirely different environment, mostly remote. How to do those things that in person or under normal circumstances may have been a little bit easier to help stay in touch, stay connected, and drive engagement. But now a whole new ballgame relative to that, and they're seeking opportunities as to how they can close those gaps in development that may have been addressed in a specific leadership program or cohorts getting together. It's a whole new approach to design and delivery of learning. I'd mentioned it a couple of minutes ago. Customer that I'm working with right now, when we're looking at some of the drivers of engagement, this growth and development has emerged as even stronger, and seeing really strong correlations to areas that are both important and we hadn't seen before. So one of them was about feeling supported during change. Those that are getting a little bit more learning and development, whether or not it relates exactly to change or not, are feeling more engaged. We're also seeing inclusion scores increasing, and inclusion, at least with this particular organization, becoming a stronger driver of engagement. And in this case, it looks like inclusion is essentially just, you're giving me the opportunity to help, whether I go through some kind of a micro development program or a little bit of learning, I feel included, I feel stronger here. I'm able to use that in a way that helps me feel more connected and more engaged. And so we're just seeing the real importance of this fourth habit, and it being done as effectively as possible in the flow of work and in a remote environment, as we're uncertain about where people are going to be sitting and what they're going to be doing. So making sure that that's baked into the design of this. So if we could, James, advance, let's take a look at Margot again. We mentioned, Margot, she went to a required leadership development course. Course was great, but when she got back to her desk and work, that connection to impacting people's success seemed to be missing. In fact, forgot all about what she learned in class and thought, man, maybe I could have been spending a little bit more, time in a better sense. So, but looking at it through a people success lens, in thinking about it more from feedback and conversations, Margot's reaching out to get some 360 feedback from her team and others. And then that's linking directly to recommendations that are based on her individual results, based on the feedback she's getting, and an action plan suggesting areas of improvement or development as well. So Margot knows exactly what she can be doing to impact her own growth as a leader and the success of the team. So she's using those habits with herself and what she's doing as well. And lastly on this point, James, if you wouldn't mind going to the next one. You can go ahead and build through this. I think there's 3 graphics in here. Yeah, that learning should really be done, as I mentioned, in that flow of work, and in a way that's is least disruptive to that flow of work and a person's ability to complete their work as possible. So not lengthy learning plans in the context of action taking. It should be relevant. Put it in the context of the person's feedback whenever possible, as opposed to just general learning for someone in this role. If we can make it much more specific, in this case, to what Margot needs based on the feedback that she's getting. Nice bite-sized, so it could be integrated into work, collaborative. And then also some of the best learning occurs when we can attach it or create some social accountability around it and sharing. And so that's one of the things that we're finding as a best practice too, is letting others know what you're doing, kind of declaring that, making it a little visible to others in your organization. And of course, that can all be enabled relatively easily through technology, making sure that getting the right insights, linking that right to the recommendations, something that's very specific and relevant, and then something that can be achieved easily through the flow of work. So we've got another breakout session on this. I'll hand it out to Jeff to lead us into that one.
Yeah, you bet. So we're going to follow a similar format that we did the first time. Before we head into that breakout, we had a great question that came up in the chat. Kristen fired out kind of the comment question. I'm hearing from CEOs, they're concerned about employee burnout and engagement. And I'm wondering how much CEO dumping this problem on HR, or are they working with HR to help address this? Love that comment and that input, because it is mission critical to get your leadership in the organization to be echoing some of the things that we as HR leaders know are critical. And for them to model that is something that I'm actually seeing this COVID, again, silver linings on this like pandemic period. I'm actually seeing the COVID time be an opportunity for HR to actually push a little bit more of this into the court of the CEO to support. So I'm hearing much more, many more examples of CEOs that are like briefing the organization on a very frequent basis around activities and resources that are available through the organization, encouraging employees to actually utilize those resources, and actually modeling some of like the well-being or activities that would prevent burnout to the organization. Things like, I'm taking time away and I'm doing this as an effort to engage or to improve my well-being, and that coming directly from the CEO. So also like establishing activities like no meeting days, or an actual like total organizational kind of freeze period where they say we're going to allow everyone to have today off, and encouraging managers who know that they have an employee base who can't take that particular like organizational day off to find another day that's coming up where it would make sense for that employee to take off. So Kristen, to answer your question, I'm seeing, again, silver lining here of COVID, in that CEOs clearly can see burnout is an issue. And so they're getting behind some of the efforts that we long wanted them to get behind as HR professionals. Great. All right. Thank you for that question or comment. We're gonna go into a breakout session. Again, we're gonna follow the same exact formula that we did the first time because it worked. Love those comments that you provided back to us. So what barriers exist to make habits 3 and 4 come to life, and what are some of the accelerators that exist in your organization to also like make 3 and 4 come to life? So James is going to get you taken off into breakouts, and then we'll come back and share a little bit as well. So we're to bring this second breakout to a closure. We want to do the same thing. The input from the groups last time was so valuable. So we'd like for there to be a couple of volunteers. Don't forget to put some comments into the chat. But if we have a volunteer or two from one of the groups, that'd be great.
Don't forget to unmute yourself before you start talking.
This is Karen. One of the things that we talked about was that trying to do something programmatic can feel very heavyweight, and especially in a larger organization, and it can die under its own weight. So we talked about finding ways to locally equip managers to have not only the one-on-ones with their people, but then to know what kind of micro actions or customized things they can do with their employees. The managers may not have that those resources in their head already. So helping them maybe with a coach or some kind of one-on-one help their employees rather than a big old rollout of a program might be one way to get past the barrier of trying to build a huge program.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. It's funny that you bring that up because one of the big learnings that I think that we've had at LinkedIn has been just that these large organizational efforts definitely have an impact, but there is a clear need to help managers kind of all throughout do things on a more routine basis and be exposed to like ideas of how you could better goal set, how you can like do that right now, how you can help prioritize during this time. In fact, we started implementing, not to give too much proprietary information, but we started to implement, these really like we call them learning 1, 2, 3 emails that go out to the manager. And it's a lesson that you can read in less than 2 minutes. Just quick, it's very pointed, but they're coming very, very frequently. And so it's helping to equip those managers. Love it. Thanks, Karen. Appreciate it. We have maybe one more individual that can share from a group. That'd be great.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karina. So our group discussed some barriers to achieving these goals. And two of the key points that we hit on were time and flexibility. And another thing that we also really highly focused on was the issue of how a lot of leadership are promoted due to years of service, but not really based upon capability and having strong leadership skills. So unfortunately, it seems to be a trickle-down effect where it's been something that has been ongoing for many, many years. And it is still something, unfortunately, that is still a challenge in our everyday, HR world right now.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, that's it. That's a really strong point in terms of, fostering some of these like old kind of mindsets around where promotions go and how that can have that trickle down effect and a lasting impact on the organization. Really good points. Thanks, Karina. One of the things that I'd challenge you to do when you leave this session is to continue having these conversations, like verify if the barriers that you identified and the accelerators that you identified match with what others in your organization would say as well. And that can generate a real kind of actionable next step to say, like, what would be like one barrier that we could go and tackle to start better implementing a more successful people success strategy. So Jim, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I appreciate everybody providing some input. Thank you for that. And thank you for the conversation as a whole. I have to say we were in a breakout as well. And we were, quite frankly, we were bragging about the different comments that had been talked about during the first breakout session. And these second pieces of input were also just as valuable. So I'm sure the conversations were great in the breakouts. We appreciate you staying with us the entire time. Maybe just like recap by reiterating the 4 people success habits. So encourage you to capture more frequent insights and feedback for your managers, especially. Have more routine, regular conversations. Remember, like what Tom talked about in the ACT framework. The ACT framework is not meant to be a conversation framework that is solely to be used for conversations around survey results. They can be used, it's a framework that can be around anything, right? It's simply acknowledging a piece of information and then getting the employee and the manager to engage in a meaningful dialogue around what do we do to address this thing that we're talking about. So I'd encourage you to think about adopting that. Remember goals and really think about that ruthless prioritization. Right now, we're all distracted. We've got maybe some kids that are doing remote learning in another room that pop into the office from time to time. Our office is in the same setup. It's a room that we sleep in. So we're all trying to like figure out like how do we balance this time period or this our time right now. And then lastly, don't forget learning. Right now, it's very tempting to put your heads down and to just run, right? And to just start doing. But we want to be purposeful about presenting our employees with the opportunity to learn and grow, because we know that is, and it's been a universal truth to getting someone engaged, is that you have to provide them those opportunities for learning and growing. In this time period that we're in right now, it's no different. It's more challenging perhaps because we all want to put our heads down and run. But the real challenge here is to think about how do we like get that into a habit so our employees do truly have that opportunity to learn and grow even during this challenging time period. So with that, I'll turn us over to Lori, who I think is going to take us through a couple of wrap-up steps here.
Yes, thank you so much, Craig, Tom, and Jeffrey. Awesome presentation. Everyone giving them a hand. All right, and just a few closing comments. We've had great conversation in chat. We'd love to continue this conversation in Slack. So you should all be getting invites to Slack, and Tom and Craig and Jeffrey have agreed to stay on. And as an incentive, they will be sharing their slides, a version of their slides and some toolkits in Slack. So you'll definitely want to join. We will be transferring, Payal will be transferring the comments into Slack as well. And if any of you would like some training right now on Slack, she is willing to stay on for a few minutes. Payal, you want to just, well, you can see Payal, she's down in the corner there. So yeah, okay, there's her email. You can either stay on and get some training or email her for some one-on-one training. Let's see, be sure and save the chat if you'd like to, those three little dots. You can go ahead and click that and save the chat. And let's move on to the next slide, James. We would love to hear your feedback. It's super important to us. So there's two ways you can do this. You can go ahead and click on the QR code, or you, James will put a link in the chat. The first 20 respondents will get a $5 gift card. So that's exciting. The other thing is if you love this and you would like to continue working with us more closely, we are looking for committee members. So Barbara Bales committee is looking, that's experience creation. So creating really, we call it experience creation because we're trying to create experiences. So looking for speakers, but more importantly, the experience with our members. And our community build and marketing committee, which is about member engagement, is also looking for committee members. And so you can contact myself or Julie Curry or Marilyn Stemper. So you can put your name in chat or join us on Slack. And with that, is there anything else that needs to be said, Mike or Barbara?
Doing great. Thanks, Lori.
Is there anyone who wants to stay on for Slack training? If you do, go ahead and stay on. We just wish you a really wonderful Thanksgiving and come back and join us for our holiday party. We promise to make it fun.
And don't forget to register for January's program. It's going to be really awesome.
Yes, it will.
Thanks, everybody.
Anyone staying on for Slack training?
I'll stay on. This is Susan Miller.
Oh, Susan, okay. Payal. Oh, Payal's not on. Okay, that's okay. We'll do it. Okay.
All right. There you go.
I'm going to just go ahead and text Payal and see if she wants to come back on. Okay. Are you staying on for training as well, Lisa?
No, sorry, I need to hit click leave. Sorry.
Kelly, are you staying?
I'm doing the survey.
Okay, awesome. Kelly, are you going to stay as well?
Yes.
Okay, so we got two. Okay, two. We've got
Kelly.
two. Just want to say hi.
Hi, Kristen.
Okay, great. I thought that was great. I thought they did a great job. Yeah. Yeah. Good job, Barbara.
They actually got done on time. That was great.
Yeah, we did. That was exciting. Oh, and we have to admit Pyle. Okay,
Yeah,
here she is.
I just did. I'm gonna head out, guys. Thank
All right.
you. Bye-bye.
Right. Have a great Thanksgiving, Barbara.
You too.
You deserve it.
Bye. We all do.
Pyle, yay.
Hi, I was so hungry because I didn't have breakfast, so I ran out. I didn't know. Anyway, I'm here and super excited. So I guess the question is like, do you guys want me to go through like how do you log in and get into Slack, or what's the best sort of
I copied your link and I got in, I registered. And so I'm just thinking going forward for me, it'd be helpful just to know can I just continue to log in, and that's where I would need to go for everything.
Yeah, I usually just leave Slack. There's a desktop application if you like it. So let me just share my screen. Oddly enough, I think I just had your, how do I share screen? There we go. I think I just had your name, or maybe not. So yeah, so I think you can go in, if you're ever logging in, you just sort of want to look in here, and sometimes people have multiple, like I have many different Slack channels, so you can switch workplaces here. But like once you're in, we haven't had too much activity on the introductions channel, but we were asking people to introduce themselves here. So you can just write a quick message, and then really when you want to respond to people, so for example, I think there was a couple of questions in diversity and inclusion. I know Trisha asked one that was curious about people's adoption benefits. So you could just go in here and you could type, and then it'll just post, and it's like, oh, I don't want to post that. You can go in, go to edit message or delete message. So I'm going to delete my message. It's a pretty easy platform from it's basically like an instant messenger with people that you're not connected with on Gmail or something like that. But a couple of cool tricks here is I can say, hey, Lori, oops. And so now I've tagged her, so she's going to get a notification that says, hey, check this out. Do you have any answers here from your consulting work?
And Pyle, will that ping you via email, or will that come through your Slack channel?
So I get notifications on my phone for Slack. You can get, so sorry, I just want to delete it so it doesn't. Let's do it together. I don't actually, tools.
Because I've used Slack before in my other company, but it was all internal.
Mm-hmm.
So I got pinged via my email, but since this is separate.
You can set up your settings, yeah, to get me. Yeah. There you go.
So I'm in this notifications, all new messages. I think there must be a way to get the notifications.
There he is. There's a click down at the bottom. Send me email notifications.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But because I have the app installed, I just get the notifications on my phone, or sometimes like you can turn them off, and and just depends on the system you have. But yeah.
Thank you.
I have that on my phone, so I get a little orange number, and also I have the icon on my desktop too, so I can see when I have messages.
Yeah. Exactly. The desktop notification. So for me, I guess you can't see it because you can only see this screen, but I have my work is like my desktop. So I don't add anything else there. And then I keep a separate just web browser open. And that way I don't get confused.
Susan, are you in Slack yet?
Yes, I'm actually trying to download it on my phone, but yeah, I logged into that earlier.
So Kelly, if you use this for work, you're pretty good on how to use it, right? Okay.
I find the biggest challenge I have with stuff like this is how to filter and find information.
So there's a really good search. I think Slack has a pretty good search capability here. So you can just say adoption. And then it'll come up with anybody who's asked any questions on adoption, any of the answers, and then the thread of where it was written. So you can view it in the channel, or let's say I'm like, I don't want to know anything, like Trisha is just not on my radar screen. I don't want to hear from her because I've already heard from her on the topic. I can filter by like whoever, you know, so you can filter by channel, you can filter by the end date, things like that. But also one of the things that I like about Slack is that things happen in thread. So it's a little bit less, in my opinion, right? I think it's a little bit less busy than just a regular board where people are responding to things that are above. So for example, Trisha posted this, Trisha is one of our board members. She posted, or one of our committee members, she posted about the adoption. So I wrote back in line. And so only if you are curious about this, do you click in, and I was like, oh, I'm not too helpful, but I have this. So that's sort of a best practice.
I missed that. How did you get the thread?
Or I just clicked on it, but if you want to respond to somebody in a thread, you say reply to thread, and then it sort of shows up in your other board. So
got it.
For example, here, there you go. Great presentation today. So I can say, I can either like it, right? Or add any other emojis that I feel. And then I can say to, maybe to Susan specifically, the most insightful data.
So what's the difference between responding in thread to responding down at the bottom of the page there on the left where it says send a message?
Mm-hmm. Because if you respond in thread, then you know what I'm talking about. If I just said, I put this out here, and there was a lot of activity, and it's like, was I asking Rachel? Was I referring to something up above? And yeah, it crowds the board. So here, anybody who wants to talk about the presentation, or like Susan and I want to have a back and forth, we can have it sort of not offline, but it doesn't crowd up the space as much.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a couple of, I think it's just some learning curves, but for example, like return to office. So Kristen here, she's not on the call anymore? Oh, darn. Because this would be like a good example of something that she should have just responded in thread, because otherwise people may not know, like here I'm asking about a chief people officer being remote. In this thread, it would have been helpful to get her perspective. And like Trisha and I here, I guess it's going back and forth on this topic.
So how do you tell if there is a thread attached to a particular message?
Right here. See how
yeah.
I posted, and then it says 2 replies.
Yeah. Okay, great.
So if you want to view
that's
the
a good
thread,
upgrade for us, Mike, isn't it?
Lori, I didn't hear you. Could you say that again?
Oh, I said that's a good upgrade for us. I've just learned how to do threads. It wasn't as intuitive.
Yeah, I saw the threads, but I didn't quite get the distinction until now.
Yeah, let me, if you guys will stick with me for a minute, let me go into like this is the Lattice, which is a performance management software. There's so much happening at any given point in time that, let's say if I go into diversity, equity, and inclusion, people are posting so many different topics, you just never know, so like apparently this one is 6 people responded here, so, and then somebody else posted a completely different question and a completely different question. So if I wanted to just understand, like I sometimes have to go back, so let's say I search here for return to office dates. Yeah, so this person's saying, I'm trying to find a good thread to show you an example, but you kind of get it. This has nothing to do with it, but say somebody posted, hey, I know somebody's not coming back. When do I officially terminate them? There were 3 responses, and we can read about that particular thing. And then there's probably people that'll go back and forth on very like specific topics. And then if you want to understand more about your threads, you can go in and click here, and then it'll say, threads that you've responded to. And then, I asked the same question that I asked on HR Strategy Forum here, which is, can a head of people or chief people officer really be remote if the whole company's not remote? So I got a bunch of responses from people. And then if I want to respond in the thread, I can do that. And then when we go back to this thing, maybe that's not a topic that people want to talk about, right? So there were 6 people that wanted to talk about it, great. But maybe somebody else just posted this, and this seemed like a more pertinent thread for other people. Does that make sense?
And well, it makes perfect sense to me. Just out of curiosity, since we have a lot of new users like me, can you as a moderator go through and take a bunch of messages out of the general thing and put them into the thread where they really ought to be? So that the general
I don't know if a
messages
moderator can do that, but you can ask. So let's see.
Yeah, we probably need to just be telling people that that's something you could reply in thread.
So
to.
like this is Kristen's response, right? I can copy the link and go up here into my thread and then just paste it. And then it'll show you that like Kristen responded here.
But then can you delete it from the left
No,
side?
I mean, have to ask her.
I just wondered.
Actually, I can. Look at that. I can. As a moderator, it looks like I can.
Yeah. Okay.
Susan, do you have any questions?
No, I'll put some comments in here and go back and read some of the old stuff. Well, at least in the last 4 weeks, and see if I have anything to add.
Yeah.
There's some interesting names on here because I know half these folks.
That's so great.
It was neat to see Julie Curry on the call today. There's a bunch of people I've forgotten that I knew since I moved down here to San Diego 4 years ago.
Oh.
But I'm starting to do more consulting back up in the Bay Area again. So, it's good to stay connected.
Well, it is. And we just really started with not this meeting, but the meeting before. So we're hoping that this will become more of an intimate resource sharing place for us, for our members and our community. And we were trying to do that on LinkedIn, and we had a lot of people that really weren't coming to our meetings that were on there, and we were getting a lot of spam. And so we just decided that this would be better. Yeah.
I think that's great. It's a different forum than some of the other groups that I participate in. I like that this one's a little bit more engaging and interactive. Some of the other ones that I participate in, it's like canned presentation, and it's like I get so much of that. So I like that you guys did the breakout rooms, or Glenn, however whoever's getting the feedback. I appreciate that this one was a little bit interactive like that.
Well, we
'cause
try to make them all interactive, and we're more and less successful depending on the topic and the presenter, but we always try to have that component if possible.
I think it's great. It looks like you've got quite a big list of people who will participate on and off. But it's also looks like it's realistic to have only 6 meetings a year as opposed to meet monthly. That makes it much more meaningful. And then you have this interchange in between where people can go and ask comments to a group that they trust.
Oh,
job.
good. Thank you for that. Well, so support us on that, because I think if people see that there's some juicy conversations happening in Slack, our thinking is that makes the community more valuable, and then also wants people to come to program meetings and meet people.
Yeah, there's another group that I participate with called People Strategy Solutions, and they bring in really fantastic guest speakers. And so they do about a 45 to 50-minute presentation and an hour and a half total, but there's a lot of interesting discussion. So I actively give them a lot of questions that I come across. Otherwise, sometimes they stall out on, what's really happening. Like, how are you changing onboarding since this whole thing happened? Because like every company has had to do something different. And when you have 50 participants and you ask, what is the one unique thing that you did to change in your onboarding strategy to make sure people have the right foot in the door and they can get started quickly? That was some meaningful information to get 50 tips.
Wow.
And then what are you doing for your compensation philosophy? How is that being altered with this new way of work? And if 50 people comment, just provide one thing that's different, it was huge to talk about. You're changing your variable pay plan. Well, how are you changing that? And what are the dynamics of that? Or you're looking at your benefits in a different way because benefits is more important, although you can't go to the doctor. So having one question or two and having 50 people reply on it has been kind of an interesting take for that group.
I agree. I mean, I think that's like one of the reasons that Slack was something that we wanted to experiment with, which is sometimes you just need to crowdsource to check your own feelings or get data for leadership, or just like, okay, did I forget to think about this? And so I hope that people start to use the Slack channel a little bit more frequently for questions like that.
But that would be an interesting test to see, if you've got 60 or 70 participants on here, pick a couple of meaty questions that are tied to your next program and get some pre-data that you can share with this group here.
Yeah.
Or at least just to start, question of the week, and then everyone knows every Monday to go in there and see what it is. And then during the week, we can have the discussions.
That would be awesome.
You are just awesome. Are you interested in joining our committee?
I might be. Yeah,
I do.
Karina can try to copy doing
Yes.
that. She was the one that sent me the invite.
Okay, so
and then Kelly will hit me up later because she's going to want to know how to do rapid growth at her new startup. And
After I've been there for 4 weeks. I'm still on week 3.
And then one of the 16 might cancel, eventually tag me somewhere.
Okay, all right, that's good to know.
I'm going to jump off, guys. Thank you so much. This was great.
Thanks for this tutorial, and thank you for inviting me. And I look forward to hearing more about the next one of these. And Lori, if you want to have some other discussion, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to.
I will.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Bye, Susan. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Karina.
We're still recording. Oh, how'd that happen?